Let's talk about academic reading. At university, almost every course of study involves a lot of reading. It can be challenging to manage the amount of reading you will be assigned each week. This means you will need to develop skills in reading quickly and reading efficiently. This presentation is going to give you some advice on how to do that. You will need to learn to read quickly to find relevant sections of text. Then you'll need to learn to read carefully when you have found the information you need. At university, you will need to read for lectures. That means you will be expected to prepare for your lectures by pre-reading several articles. You might have 2 or 3 articles assigned every week. You will also need to read for tutorials. Tutorials are often based on assigned readings. So these articles that you read before your lectures, you might also get some readings before your tutorials. You will not be able to participate in group discussions in your tutorials if you have not pre-read this material. You won't have anything to talk about. You will also need to read for your assignments. You cannot start to write your assignment until you have read and researched many different sources of information. The reading comes before you can do any writing. So let's talk about some reading techniques. Our first technique is called skimming. This means you look quickly through a text to find the main points of that text, and this is the way you can decide whether it will be a useful text to read in further detail or not. We're also going to talk about scanning. This means you look quickly through a text for specific information. For example, let's say you're doing an assignment on online learning in a university context. You need to know whether this text is going to be relevant for you, so you look out for these key words: online learning and university. This is scanning. Finally, there's reading for detail. This means you look closely at the text to understand and evaluate the information in detail. Note-taking is also a very important thing to do when you are at this stage. At this stage, you have already skimmed and scanned the text to decide if it is relevant for you. To determine whether a text will be useful, without reading every single word, you can first look at several things. You can look at the cover, especially if it's a book. You can look at the title. The title should have a couple of the keywords you are looking for. You can look at the index. You can look at the preface if it's a book, the table of contents, the titles of the chapters if it's a book with chapters. You can look at the abstract if it's a journal article you're looking for. You can also look at the headings and subheadings within chapters or sections of a journal article. And finally, you can read the introduction and the conclusion. If you look at all of these things, you should be able to determine whether it is worth it to read the text in great detail and take notes. Use your skimming and scanning techniques to avoid reading too closely at this stage. You don't have to read in detail until you are sure the text is going to be useful for you. All right, we need to be selective. We're not going to be able to read every single thing. Reading takes a lot of time and it can be very challenging. If you are selective about it, this will help you. Find out which of your assigned readings are required and which are suggested. So, like I mentioned before you go to your lectures, you need to read maybe 2 or 3 different articles. Your unit outline should tell you which articles are required and suggested. Read the required ones first and the suggested ones if you have time. When you are researching for your assignments, you do not always have to read the entire text in detail, even if you've decided that it's relevant. You can look for specific information and keywords relating to your assignment question and just read the parts of the text that you really think you need. You might need to read only one section or a couple of paragraphs to find what you need for your assignment. Just read that one section or those couple of paragraphs in detail. Another tip is focus on what is manageable. Academic reading is tough and it requires concentration and focus for long periods of time. So here's what you can do to make it more manageable. You can break the reading up into smaller parts. For example, read one chapter at a time, read an individual article, or even read a specific number of pages. You can say, I'm going to read 10 pages today and 10 pages tomorrow. Identify the purpose of your reading. Do you need to skim, do you need to scan, or do you need to read in more detail? And think about the time that you have available. Obviously, reading in detail will take a lot more time than skimming or scanning. Plan to skim and scan when you don't have a lot of time available for you. You can also set yourself goals. For example, I will read 3 articles today. I will read for 2 hours. I will read 10 pages and then stop. Whatever works for you. Finally, reward yourself with a break when you reach your goal. Always record the reference. I have put this on a separate slide because it is extremely important. Record the reference, the full reference, for each source so that you know exactly where your notes have come from. If you are going to use direct quotes, remember that you have to make a note of the page number. It is going to be very difficult if you need to go back into a long text to try and find a page number. So please make sure you write this at the top of your notes so you don't forget where it's come from. This is the end of your academic reading presentation. Please look at the other presentations in StudyLab.